Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. The sun is out. I should be out in it, enjoying it, making the most of the nice weather, but I thought, nah, I'll stay indoors and do another boxing video because I'm that sad. But I wanted to do something a bit special, or a little bit different maybe, because a question that often gets asked is, what was the best era for boxing, or what was the best decade for boxing? And sometimes it's difficult to put a fighter in a particular decade because they might have fought over 2 decades, so you're thinking, well, when did they get their best work done? And, but I think one decade that gets overlooked by younger boxing fans nowadays is the 1940s. And I'm going to talk about some of the fighters that existed then and that, really were great champions. And these are guys who, you'd put them in the Hall of Fame in a flash. Now, let's, who do we start with? I'll tell you what, let's start with one of the greats, a defensive wizard, Willie Pep. By the way, before I start, I'm going to point out that I had a look at BoxRec at the records of the fighters I'm going to talk about. I'm not doing this entirely from memory, trust me, not at this age. But I wanted to go by the BoxRec records because even though they fluctuate and sometimes, fights get added and a few get taken off as erroneous, I did want to, I'll go by the BoxRec records because otherwise people will look it up and they'll say, well, you said it was this record and, in actual fact, BoxRec says it's this and that. But even though the BoxRec records, once you go back 60, 70, 80 years, aren't perfect by any means, we'll go by that. It's difficult to keep comprehensive records anyway. True historians will often unearth some obscure fight that happened and they can prove it and therefore it has to be added or certain ones have to be taken off and so on and so forth. So any records that I mention, if you want to check them, go to BoxRec, all right? So Willie Pep, Will-O-the-Wisp, a defensive master who finished with 229 wins, 65 KOs and stoppages, 11 defeats, 6 by KO and 1 draw. Now, a lot of people will say, well, he got stopped 6 times in his 11 defeats. How come he's called a defensive wizard? Well, talk about, splitting hairs. I mean, the guy had, over 240 fights. So you're going to get stopped a few times. And also, the one knock against Pep when it comes to, he was featherweight champion, world champ. The one knock against him when people say he was the greatest featherweight champ ever is that he fought Sandy Sadler, a very dirty fighter, 4 times, and he lost 3 times. I think all 3 were by stoppage, but he won. The one he won, which was a 15-round decision, was for the world title. Okay, you can. Look, if you take any fighter's record, you can do some digging and find negatives. That's inevitable. But there's no doubt about it that he was defensively brilliant. And the legend has it, I don't know whether this is true or it probably isn't, that he actually won a round once by not landing a punch just because he was avoiding the other guy's punches and he was so slick and he looked so brilliant, and in the end, the judges said, well, we're going to give him that round, even though he didn't land a punch, because he just looked so incredible. Defensively, he was just so brilliant. Now, he was, without question, he was one of the greatest featherweight champions ever. Just an absolute master, brilliant fighter. And today he would hold multiple belts at multiple weights, and to fight that long. He fought, until the mid 60s. But again, I'm talking about the 1940s, and I'm going to say that his best work was done in the 1940s. So, yeah, go check him out. I mean, there is footage of him. Some of these fighters, there's very, very little footage of them. But yeah, Willie Pep. There are more obvious names like Ray Robinson, of course, is often considered to be the greatest fighter ever. He did it, in my opinion, as great as he was at middleweight. If you look at his record, and there was no footage, this picks up on what I just said, no footage of his 1940s welterweight heyday when he was apparently even better than he was at middleweight. And he was only ever a small middleweight anyway, Ray Robinson. He probably a light middleweight by today's standards, 154, 155, maybe 156 at a push. That was his optimum weight. But as a welterweight, he was absolutely extraordinary. Fought middleweights even when he was a welterweight. Of course, he's got wins over God knows who you want to say. Charlie Burley, Kid Gavilan. I mean, who else was there? Just so many. LaMotta he had 5 fights. Was it 5 or 6 fights with LaMotta? I think it was 5. Might have been 6 actually. And LaMotta was the one that took his unbeaten record. That made Ray a mere 90 wins and 1 defeat at the time. And he beat Ray in the rematch 3 weeks later. All right, so that's enough of that. Don't whine if you're a boxer nowadays about your schedule. He also beat Henry Armstrong when Armstrong, I think, Armstrong was a smaller guy, but another incredible fighter I'll get to in a moment. But yeah, Ray Robinson, you know about Ray Robinson, don't you? I mean, I don't need to tell you that much about him. 174 wins with 109 KOs, 19 defeats, only 1 was by stoppage. And that was when he went up to light heavy to challenge Joey Maxim, and he collapsed in the 13th round. It was incredibly hot in the ring. And fighters couldn't knock him out, but the heat did. But, you got to be honest about this. I mean, it was the same for Maxim as well. Maxim himself was a very, very good fighter. So Ray Robinson, you know about him. You also know about Joe Louis, heavyweight champ, 26 defenses, held the title for 12 years, finished with 66 wins and 52 KOs, and only 3 defeats. 2 of those were when he was way past his best. He lost to Ezard Charles, another great, great fighter we'll get to in a minute. And he got knocked out by Marciano in his final fight, got stopped in 8 rounds of a 10-rounder. Now, I don't need to tell you much about Lewis. The knock against Lewis is that he fought, lesser opposition because it was a sort of pretty much a supposedly barren heavyweight division back then. But, if you beat Jersey Joe Walcott twice, and I know the first one was very controversial. Most people think Walcott won, but Lewis got him in the rematch in 11 rounds. Ezard Charles, he lost to Charles in the over 15. Of course he did. I'm thinking of Billy Conn, another great light heavyweight. He beat him twice. He beat Buddy Bear, who wasn't a bad fighter, often overlooked. Even people like Abe Simon weren't that bad. They're sort of B-level fighters, B-level contenders, maybe you'd say, but they're not bad fighters. And Lewis was battering them. So, it's kind of a little bit churlish when people sort of start talking about boxers' records and start picking it apart. And you can do this with anyone. You can do it with anyone, literally anyone. And you can find little flaws. And even nowadays with active fighters, people do that, But anyway. So let's go to the lightweights next, because we had three fighters who fought each other, and they were all brilliant fighters. Bo Jack, Bob Montgomery, and Ike Williams. 3 terrific fighters. Action-packed guys. Bo Jack, I remember towards the end of his life, there was a very famous interview with him, and he was clearly quite frail because, as with most fighters from that era, he lost his money, and it took its toll on the amount of fights he had. But he was being interviewed, and he said, I was stuck on the ropes, and was it Ike Williams was battering him, and the referee stepped in and stopped the fight. He said, but you got to kill me where I stand. I'm a fighter, and you got to kill me. And this little frail old man he still had it in him, even though physically he was completely depleted. He's like, I don't quit. You got to kill me. And thank God the referee stepped in. And then Williams was interviewed. I think it was a sort of, they were separate interviews, but they were put together for this documentary. And then Ike Williams was interviewed, and he said, I was looking at the referee saying, what do you want me to do? Kill him? It's fantastic stuff, 2 old fighters reminiscing about their wars. And Williams did beat Jack. He stopped him in 8 rounds. I think Jack was pulled out by his corner, or the ref stopped it. I think the ref, he wanted to come out, of course he did, Bo Jack, but the ref said, no more. But I mean, Bo Jack, 91 wins, 44 KOs, 24 losses and 4 stoppages and 5 draws. Typical sort of record from that era. And I mean, he also drew, by the way, with Ike Williams. This was towards the end of his career, and Ike Williams, we'll get to him in a minute. I think I think they had about, they might have had 3 or 4 fights. I can't remember offhand, but I know he also fought Kid Gavilan, another brilliant fighter. Yeah, yeah. Johnny Bratton, I think, was in the mix somewhere. Sammy Angot, Bojack beat him. Yeah. Al Bummy Davis was another one. He was a pretty good fighter. So he had wins, but and I think he held the New York State Athletic Commission lightweight world championship. But when he fought, I think when he fought for the main title, I think I'm doing this from memory, so I might be getting this wrong. I think he lost when he fought for the lightweight title. If you know about this stuff, leave your comment below. Correct me. I might be getting this wrong. But anyway, apart from Bojack, let's move on to Bob Montgomery. Actually, no, we'll do Ike Williams next. Ike Williams, because he had those several fights with Jack. 3 or 4. I'm sure it was 3 or 4. I think he won 3 of them, maybe. Yeah. He finished with 126 wins, 61 KOs, 24 defeats, 6 by stoppage, and 4 draws. And he was cut from precisely the same cloth as Bojack and Bob Montgomery. I'll come to in a minute. And as his KO percentage suggests, he hit hard. I mean, half of his victories were by stoppage. And he was a world champ. He was world lightweight champ. He was one of those great lightweight champions who is, I wouldn't say they're forgotten, but they're probably not as appreciated as they should be, if you know what I mean. He fought Johnny Bratton as well, and he also, he lost to, he got knocked out by Jimmy Carter, not the ex-president of the United States, for the world lightweight title. But he was a champion, wasn't he? Or wasn't he? Yeah, he was, because he was. That was a defense of his lightweight title. Yeah. Okay. He also lost twice to Kid Gavilan on points, back-to-back fights, and and again another warrior, another absolute warrior, another lightweight warrior. What can you say? I can't really add. If for what I said about Bojack, you can pin all that on Ike Williams as well. And of course, the other one I mentioned was Bob Montgomery. Now he had a knockout win over Ike Williams, and he fought Bojack. I think he lost once to Bojack. They had several fights, I'm sure, and he definitely won. And I think they went the distance, but he knocked out Al Bummy Davis in 1 round. But that's Al Bummy Davis was a good fighter. He also fought Fritzy Zivic and beat him on points. So Bob Montgomery was more of a technical fighter. And again, the footage of these guys is it's not as extensive as you'd like it to be, because a lot of it's been lost and a lot of the fights weren't even filmed. But from what I've seen, even though he was an aggressive fighter, and he had 75 wins with 37 KOs, but he was slightly more technical than Bojack. Bojack was the real slugger. He had skills, but he liked the row. He liked a good old punch up. And then, to be honest, they all did. But Bob Montgomery, I always felt, he used his skills a little bit more. And by the way, when I say 19 defeats, I think the last 6 or 7 were on the trot at the end of his career, when he was losing to people who he did get stopped actually in, I think, 6 rounds for the lightweight title by Ike Williams. And then I think he lost every other fight he had, about 5 or 6 more fights he had, and he lost a lot. He lost all of them. I think they're all on points as well. So he was collecting paychecks like a lot of fighters. He didn't really hold on to his money. But another very good fighter, Bob Montgomery, really, really good fighter. And yeah, he fought, Bojack, Ike Williams, Fritzy Zivic, um, just like almost like Sammy Angot. I think he fought him. I think he lost to Sammy Angot. But he fought really, really good fighters. They all had to fight the best of that era if they want to make any money, because there wasn't really a lot of money flying around then, and they weren't making big money even when they fought each other. So you had great fighters facing great fighters, but very much, a top guy, definitely a top guy. The other one, if you want to talk lightweights, the one that I'm not going to dwell on this, because he did most of his work, most of his achievements were in the 30s, not the 40s. But of course, I've got to mention Henry Armstrong, who supposedly held the featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight titles simultaneously. Now, someone who knows about these things told me that actually the featherweight title, he'd either vacated it or he'd been stripped. So he didn't actually. That's a myth that he held all three titles together. Although he did move up to middleweight and got a draw with Cipriano Garcia. But those three belts that he won, don't forget, this was 8. There were 8 divisions then. No super middleweight, junior lightweight, all that sort of business, and one belt. Well, I say that there were other belts floating around, but if you're talking about the bona fide, undisputed champ, 3 divisions, he held them all, he won them all. And he got a draw, which is a debatable draw, against Cipriano Garcia for the middleweight title. But he was really just a lightweight, if that. But most of his achievements, not to say that he didn't have some great wins in the 40s, were in the second half of the 30s with Henry Armstrong. 149 wins, 99 KOs, 21 defeats with only 2 by stoppage. I think one of those stoppages was in his very first fight. He got chinned in a round, I think. And he had 10 draws in the mix as well. So another one with one of those unbelievable records. I'm not going to dwell on Henry, because, again, like Ray Robinson, he's one of the greatest fighters ever, and people know a lot about him. But just look at his record. That's all you need to know, really. Fought people much, much bigger than himself consistently, and very often knocked them out. So Henry Armstrong, we know about him. If you go down to the lower weights, bantamweight, you had Manuel Ortiz. Great bantamweight, won the title in 43. I think he lost it in 48 or 49. So he held it for about 6 years. He held it, made a string of defences. Very, very good fighter. Very, very good fighter. Had 99 wins with 53 KOs, 28 defeats, but only 1 by stoppage. And 3 draws. I mean, again, a lot of these guys have got 20, 30 defeats. But so what? They look at the quality of the opposition. Look how often they were fighting. Look how many fights they had. And Manuel Ortiz was a hugely impressive bantamweight champ. I mean, a great, great fighter. What more can you say? I mean, the 1940s, you had some great fighters in the lower weights as well. I suppose you could say you do in any era, but he was probably the best little guy from that era, unless I'm forgetting someone, which I probably am. I forgot to mention, actually, if we go back to the featherweights, Willie Pep. I mentioned Sandy Sadler, actually, briefly, who had 4 fights with Pep and beat him 3 times. He deserves a mention as well. He had 145 wins with 104 KOs, 16 defeats, was only ever stopped once, and a couple of draws in there as well. And I should have mentioned him in more depth when I was talking about Pep, because they were sort of nemesis fighters. But great fighter. He actually held a junior lightweight title as well as the featherweight title as well. And if you knock out Willie Pep in 4 rounds, which was one of the results, you're doing something right. Could be a dirty fighter, though. Him and Fritzy Zivic, who's another guy from that era, they were dirty fighters. Real elbows, heads, low punches, you name it. What can I say? Great fighter. Go check him out. Now, let's go move up a bit, up in weight. Let's go to Ezard Charles. Again, another fighter you've probably heard of. Heavyweight champ, but was really only ever a light heavyweight. Certainly had some incredible wins at light heavyweight. He had the 2 fights with Marciano at heavyweight, which he lost both of them, but he was fighting, good level light heavyweight. I mean, great, in some cases, great heavyweights. He also beat Jersey Joe Walcott as well, as we know, even though Walcott, they fought several times. Walcott won the title off him with a 7th round knockout, but he had wins over Walcott as well. Joey Maxim decisioned him over 15. He beat Gus Lesnovich, stopped him, outpointed the remnants of Joe Louis, as we know. Jimmy Bivens, he beat him. Archie Moore, he beat him. Archie, of course, one of the greatest light heavyweights ever. I think he beat Archie Moore twice or 3, maybe even 3 times. He beat a guy called Elmer Ray. No, he didn't. He lost to Elmer Ray. Elmer Ray is a very, very underrated fighter who, go and have a look at his record. Never fought for the title, but very, very good fighter. I mentioned Jimmy Bivens, didn't I? Because he fought Jimmy Bivens several times. And he also fought several of what are called, which I'll come to in a minute, the Murderers Row bunch, which I'll get to in a moment. And he fought Joey Maxim several times, beat him. Great fight. I don't really need to say much more, do I, about Ezard Charles? Now, I just mentioned the Murderers Row fighters, and to be honest with you, let's go back a little bit here, because you don't forget we were living in quite racist times back then, and an awful lot of black fighters. The colour bar, even in the 1940s, was still up and running, and a lot of fighters did not get, the credit they deserve, the opportunities that they deserve. So if we're talking about the Murderers Row lot, which were a group of fighters who were barred from fighting, more or less barred from fighting for titles. I don't think, did any of them win a world title? A proper world title? No. But they fought each other, and they were all excellent, really, really excellent fighters. You could say they were contemporaries of Sugar Ray Robinson. Robinson was the one who got all the plaudits, and he got the opportunities. But to be honest with you, he did duck a few of these, certainly in there. until they were older, put it that way. But if you're talking about the Murderers Row fighters, you're talking about, let me get this right, because I always forget a couple: Charlie Burley, Burt Lytell, Holman Williams, Aaron Wade, Jack Chase, Lloyd Marshall. Oh, did I say Holman Williams? I did, didn't I? Who have I missed out? Burt Lytell. Missed someone out. I'm going to do a video just on the Murderers Row lot, because I always miss a few out, and I shouldn't be doing that. Should not be doing that. But anyway, I won't go into all their records, otherwise we'll be here for another hour and a half. But let's put it this way: they fought each other a string of times. They were all great fighters. I mean, they were just brilliant fighters. But the best of the lot, probably, or at least according to some very reputable sources, was Charlie Burley. And I always remember years and years ago, when I was in my teens or early 20s, seeing an old VHS video of an interview with Eddie Futch, who was one of the greatest trainers ever. And they asked him, who was the best fighter you've ever seen? And he said, Charlie Burley. And the interviewer said, better than Ray Robinson? And Eddie Futch said, yes. All right, so he rated Charlie Burley as the best. Charlie Burley finished his career with 83 wins, 50 KOs, 12 defeats, no stoppage defeats at all, and he had 2 draws. And he, like I say, all the Murderers Row lot fought each other. So he fought Burt Lytell a load of times. Holman Williams, he fought him. Wade, he fought. He lost to Ezard Charles, I think, twice. But again, you're talking about Ezard Charles, who's light heavyweight and won the heavyweight title. And oh, by the way, when I say he fought Holman Williams, who himself was a great fighter, he beat him. I don't think Williams won a decision over him. I'll tell you who else Charlie Burley beat was Archie Moore. Again, a brilliant light heavyweight, one of the greatest light heavyweight fighters. He stopped Jack Chase, beat Wade on points. I mean, he was a great fighter. And I think Lytell at one point beat beat Charlie Burley. But then I think Charlie won. I think they had back-to-back fights, and I think Charlie won the first and Lytle won the second. So, you know, it's all a bit... When you've got fighters that brilliant fighting each other so often, you know, winning and losing, it almost becomes... I mean, it's important, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Do you know what I mean? I mean, even I think, actually, this is a good example of how good Fritzy Zivic was, even though he's a dirty bastard. He beat Charlie Burley. He got a split decision over him. But that was quite early on in Charlie's career, I think. And then I think Burley won the rematch or something like that. I think they only fought twice. I don't think they fought anymore. Anyway, like I say, I might do a video on the Murderers Row fighters because they deserve their own video. You know, all of them. And when I listed them, I'm sure I missed one or two out. As soon as I hit stop on this video, I'm going to be saying, why did I forget so-and-so? And that's true of the 1940s. Because to me, the 1940s was an absolute golden era of boxing. There are plenty of fighters I could have mentioned in this video. I'm sure you're going to leave comments below saying, why didn't you mention so-and-so? Why didn't I indeed? Because my memory's not what it was, probably. But maybe there's just too many to mention. I don't know. But if you do have any people you think I should have mentioned, please leave your comments below and let me know what you think of them. I've done this mostly from memory, so I might have got a few things wrong. I did look at BoxRec's records before I started the video, and like I say, go by the BoxRec records because that's what I'm doing. I'm not saying they're always flawless, but that's what I'm going by. So if you see any sort of discrepancies or any other listed records and you think, well, that doesn't tie in with what he was saying, it's because I've gone by the BoxRec records. But anyway, comments below if you've got any. Mention the fighters. What was your favourite fighter from the 40s? Who do you think was the best? Who haven't I mentioned? Leave it all down there. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Just hit that subscribe button. It takes a second and you're helping us out a great deal. And also like button, because they count the likes. Mysteriously, they count the likes. It's all down to that. What's that word I always forget? Not monetization. What's that word I always forget? Not demographic. Yeah. What am I talking about? There's a word. No, it's not going to come to me. Anyway, yeah. Thanks a lot for listening. Well, how old is it? How long is this video? 25, 27, 28 minutes, something like that? You've stuck with me. I appreciate it. Subscribe, like button, comments. Catch you later. Bye for now.